Welcome, everyone, to an all new episode of TV Dinners where we feed your entertainment soul. Yeah, that sounds not too spooky. Um, it is spooky season, and I have to say, I'm really actually enjoying seeing all of the wonderful Halloween decorations in the store now sort of in their own spot surrounded by the Christmas stuff. It's really strange out there. I don't really remember a year where it was so Christmassy and Halloween all at the same time. It's very odd. A little bit of before we get into the podcast topic here, a little bit of quick news. Um, Last night I was privileged, and I do mean privileged, to see the season one premiere, or I'm sorry, season two premiere, but episode one of Chucky. And to all you people out here who are like, oh, I don't want to watch a show about a doll, this is stupid. You know what? Put your preconceived notions aside and watch this series. It is brilliantly done. It is definitely in a class by itself. It's super, super. It's not just fun. It's intelligent. And
What
I don't mean
platform?
Chucky is actually on regular TV on what is Chucky on?
Regular
Uh
TV.
I was
yeah,
going to say there's regular TV
regular
still.
TV meaning not streaming. What is Chucky on? Darn, I totally forgot. It is because I get it on Direct TV and I DVR it, and then all of a sudden it's just sitting there. It actually is on Peacock, but you can see it also on Hulu, I believe, with like you can watch it like next day, same way that you'd watch sort of everything else. It's on USA. That's the one, USA,
Mm.
and I think it might even be on Sci-Fi too.
Okay.
It's super good. It's really, like I said, it's so well done, and I don't usually like shows where you like follow a bunch of misfit kids around because it starts feeling kind of Scooby Doo-ish. No, this isn't that. It's it's good. Very good. Secondly, tonight, although we are just a couple hours away, uh the Rings of Power sort of finale is going to happen. Um I don't know where they're going to go from here, but it
I
is kind of
know.
it's exciting.
It is
There's
exciting.
there's a lot of good stuff that has transpired over the past couple of episodes, which I just I've been really impressed with.
Me
So
too.
good job. We know that they're already going to get a season 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's awesome. Um, the other thing which I just wanted to briefly bring up is House of the Dragon. Um, I really love watching the show. I'll be a diehard fan, kind of no matter what. I mean, it's a little bit like some people's voting, kind of alliances. Well, I don't really care what he did as long as he's this or that. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about House of Dragon. I'll keep watching it no matter what, but I am going to complain like 90% of the rest of the internet and say, please stop it with the nighttime scenes that I can't see anything. Your
And they
content
mumble.
I
your
haven't
content
seen it.
doesn't mean anything if I can't see it. If I'm
I
just
haven't
reading
seen
the
it,
subtitles.
and even I know about the complaints about the darkness.
Oh, it's I mean, listen, you know what? I'm all in favor of making the show dark. But
So you can
I had
see
a
it.
I watched yeah, and I watched a great TikTok that compared, not that everything gets compared to Lord of the Rings, but I watched a great TikTok that compared the Lord of the Rings movies with House of the Dragon and how they handled the nighttime scenes. And the nighttime scenes in the Lord of the Rings movies, you could see detail, you could see people, you understood expressions. This was just it's unfathomable why they do it. I don't get it. Who watched this and said, "Oh, you know what we need to do? Let's make it so they can't see anything." That'll hook them right in.
If you
That'll
don't
make
have
it
the
even more.
subtitles, yeah. If you don't have the subtitles, you don't even know what they're saying,
Oh,
really.
and that was ridiculous. Oh my gosh. So
You
okay,
have to
so
scream like this.
exactly. We were like, we had the remote setting for the TV, and we were like pushing the contrast and the brightness all the way up, and then it looks like somebody's college project because it's all grainy and you can't see anything. It's ridiculous. Oh my god, it was crazy. Okay.
Leave my body of work from college out of this.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. You know what? I did a number of college films, and we'll talk about that on another episode. But yeah, they weren't great either. I thought they were great at the time.
Right. It's
also,
always the best when you do it.
You're right. Ego plays. Ego is a thing. What can I say? Also, tomorrow, for anyone who is interested in furthering your spooky terror season, Hellraiser starts. The Hellraiser on, and I believe it's on Hulu, updated Pinhead, updated. But the one thing that really makes me feel like this could be successful is Clive Barker himself apparently watched the content and said, "Yeah, this is exactly right. You guys got it right." So that makes me feel happy. And then now this is the last thing. I forgot. There is one more last thing. Interview with a Vampire came out last week, and oh wow. Okay, one.
I actually want to see that.
It stirred up a big storm.
I heard there's a lot of controversy over the darkness in that too, but
little different kind of darkness.
Yeah.
There's a lot that was going on there, but honestly, if you have read Anne Rice, if you appreciate Anne Rice's vision, it really felt like they took an actual page out of Interview with a Vampire and said, yeah, I think that this is more in line. So continuity is a bit different. The story is set in a different place. It does sort of have different character backgrounds, but it is definitely Louis and Lestat. There's no way you couldn't possibly see it and go, oh yeah, what? That's them.
Is Armand a part of it? He's my favorite.
Not yet, and I don't know if that is going to be like a part of later season or next season, but I do know that Claudia is heading our way.
Oh, so yay.
Yes, and she is. Claudia also is one of those characters that was like cast. She is not Lily White, so obviously it created a little bit of controversy, but in the setting this works so perfectly, and she's gorgeous. I mean, she's really gorgeous. So I really feel like this is good. It works on every cylinder that they meant to fire, and yeah, I loved it. So that kind of brings us sort of like up to date for scary, spooky, and dark season. I want to talk tonight. Actually, in a way, I don't want to talk about this because in a way, I feel like it's so controversial that it's hard to land on the right spot with this. But I'm going to brave it anyway and see if we can come up with some kind of idea about why this is so controversial and how we can maybe navigate it. When I was growing up, I grew up with sitcoms. I mean, like I grew up hearing canned laughter continually, right? And it was great because like, the audience would tell me when something was funny, and then I would go, oh yeah, that's funny. Okay. Haha.
Honestly, sometimes we need a little help.
See, seriously, right? No, that was supposed to be a joke, son. And I loved it. I really did. My parents were very much into shows like All in the Family and shows that had humor that was like, do I understand this humor? Is this like, I don't actually
Archie
get
Bunker?
it. Yes. Well, I mean, I was too young to really get it, but I definitely understood that my parents thought it was funny. And what took me forever to realize is that it's the parody of the humor that is funny. The whole reason that shows like that are funny is because they take this kind of dry slice of life humor and they turn it upside down and say, hey, you know what's really funny? When somebody acts so nuts that we can just call it out. And I love
funny
that.
On screen, but not in real life.
Yeah, right.
Like Kramer and Seinfeld, kind of.
A little bit, I think, yes, like Kramer and Seinfeld. Also, if you watched, there's always the straight guy,
Ab Fab.
right? And yeah, that's
Like
another good one.
those women are horrible. And somebody asked the writer, she played not Patsy, but Eddie. So they asked her, they're like, do you think Eddie has any redeeming qualities? And she goes, well, I tried not to write any in her.
Because it speaks for itself,
Yeah,
honestly. Yeah,
exactly.
the jokes write themselves. Then definitely as I was growing up, Roseanne was always on at our house, right? And I hated
I
Roseanne. I
love
hated it.
that
I
I
show.
love that
still
show.
Yeah, see, you know what? You know why I hated it? I hated it because I always felt like Roseanne was too close to regular life. Like, why is this funny? It's not funny that they can't do this or that. That's not fun. You shouldn't be calling that stuff out. That's just sad. The Okay,
But I guess
and
that's
then
why it's funny, because so many of us have lived like
absolutely,
that. And
absolutely.
yeah.
It wasn't until I, in particular, just this is just my own personal experience, that I started to uh dabble, if you will, in British humor by
Oh
watching
yeah.
Mhm.
things like Faulty Towers and Monty Python, and I even Black's Books, which was amazing as a series.
Baker
The
Ridley
humor
was good.
the humor is so dry. Uh no, I really was never into Benny Hill, but I'm
I
going
was
to get
never into
into
Benny Hill.
why I wasn't into Benny Hill in a second. And
I didn't like him either.
it's not because he was a dirty old man either. That's not why. I'll get into why in a second.
Ross should
Um,
be on here to give us some male humor, because none of us like
y-
Benny Hill, and he loved him.
yeah, see, and also I think men and women definitely participate in humor differently. That's
Yeah.
absolutely for sure. Um, so once I understood what I found funny, then I was able to find humor in like all the ways, all the normal ways. Like, oh, okay, I get it. This is why this is funny. Um, in the 80s, I remember watching Mork and Mindy and thinking, oh, this is so cool because it's wholesome, but it's hilarious, right? And honestly, I don't think Robin Williams at any stage in his life was funnier than when he was playing an alien. It
Yes,
was just
Mork and
so,
Mindy was
yeah.
amazing.
It
So
was it
underrated. So
very.
underrated.
The jokes are actually really good because again, they call out human existence like, oh guys, really, this is what you're doing? A couple of years ago, we watched this show which is called People of Earth, and it had very similar vibes to it, right? They basically this guy comes into he has a UFO experience, and he joins this UFO abduction group. And through the course of this series, you find out not only are the aliens real, but they are freaking hilarious. I mean, the stuff that they do is not just funny, it's like it's deep humor, it's deep sardonic humor. I absolutely loved it. But a lot of people grew up watching Growing Pains, Seinfeld for sure, and of course The Simpsons. That is just a staple, I feel like, in everybody's life. Okay, so lots and lots, I mean, we can talk forever about the shows that we grew up watching, but what I want to sort of bring to the forefront here is some of the shows that we all watched growing up now would never be made ever because the humor would immediately be X'd. You can't say that on TV. People will either be offended, not get it, or it just simply feels too out of place. And, retrospectively, I think when we look at stuff from the past, we say, well, maybe they didn't know better, or hey, it was a different time, or whatever.
Well, you know
And
what? I want to talk. So I want to say, Boy Meets World. Everyone is doing the nostalgia thing, and they brought back the new series of Boy Meets World, Girl
right,
Meets World. One of the best things about Boy Meets World was they didn't treat us like we were idiots. Like
right,
Sean had a horrible childhood. It was like extremely abusive and sad, and he was abandoned and all of these things. And they allowed us to see how he navigated through this. But
right,
then they sent it to Disney and they Disneyfied it. and there was like no cutting, there was nothing cutting edge. It was just um kids doing typical things that like most kids don't have to like deal basically there were no problems, no big issues.
Right.
And it took it like it took all of it away, like everything that was great about it.
That's actually an issue that my kids brought up to me because most of the humor that they were exposed to as they were growing up came from the Disney Channel. So they watched Hannah
No.
Montana, they watched That's So Raven, and for
Wizard of Oz.
them, their experience was, hey, this was so out of touch with who we are. I mean, yes, it was funny. The Wizards of Waverly Place was very
I
funny,
like that one.
but it was funny in a way that was like completely not a part of our everyday experience.
But at least she was
Um,
like not a perfect child like in a lot of the other series, you know?
yeah, right. Well, and for that very reason, my kids loved Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, because even though they were living obviously a life of fair
Like,
opulence,
yes.
they were still kids. They behaved just like regular kids, and
Got into
my
trouble.
kids were
Yeah.
they were very attracted to that. But okay, so let's look at a little bit how our experience of humor has sort of evolved or developed over the past, well, let's move back to the 80s and the 90s. um there was definitely a much wider swath that was considered okay for humor. And when I look at what we see on TV now, we don't have that anymore. I mean, unless I'm missing something, I don't really see the kinds of shows that were acceptable 20 and 30 years ago that I see on TV now. And I mean, that's open for debate if you guys want to tell me that there's something on TV that is like that, but I don't think that there is. Do you think that there is at all?
Okay, repeat the question. Sorry.
Okay. So I'll give you an example of a show that I'm thinking of. Right, I used to watch when I was younger. My mom used to love this show called Night Court.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I love Night Court. That was a
and
great show.
it really was funny. I mean, John LaRoquette, Harry Anderson. It was funny, but think about the things that they tackled. Right, they tackled humor that was. I don't think that they were punching down, but they definitely were like almost creating parody out of real misery. And it seemed to have its place, like it worked. But I guess my question then is, like, do you see anything that is even close to that on TV now? That and I guess I should clarify this by saying I know that there is some edgy stuff. My kid and I right now are watching Little Demon, and it's edgy. It's really edgy. It's also funny, but yeah, it's edgy. I know there is some stuff. Disenchanted is very, kind of in that vein where it's sort of making fun of things that are borderline, yeah, people to get kind of uncomfortable with it. But I don't see anything that is sort of mainstream that is that kind of humor. That's so I was asking if you am I wrong? Are you seeing something on TV that is that kind of mainstream humor?
Um, no, I don't think so. Like maybe if it's coming back, but I think what's going on in all of these reboots of the shows, they're just taking the good stuff away that made the show.
Yeah.
Like Betty said, like everything is kind of like it is Disney-fied. We're Disney owns the world. You know what I mean? Like they really do. Amazon and Disney. That's it.
So do you
I
think
saw
is it
I was in a class called the Disneyification of America in college, and they were literally dignifying it,
okay, do
Wow.
you think
pouring bleach.
is humor sanitized, or are we just evolving in a way that is least common denominator to be the basically the least controversial and the least objectionable to modern audiences?
Well, I'm sorry, and people might disagree with me, but the society today are pussies. They want everything to be politically correct. They want everything to be like, you know, watered
Well,
down
we
and
don't.
nice and sweet, so
No,
like
no, 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 no. Like we just don't want like our communities insulted because comedy shapes our views and what you're watching shapes your perception. So when you're making fun of minorities, like for instance, I'm gay, like when you're making fun of my community, then it's making it okay for other people to discriminate and make fun of our community.
Okay, and there actually is a way to make this work, because I'm going to point back to decades ago when the Golden Girls
oh, I
Oh
were
love
yeah,
on
Golden
Golden
Girls.
Girls
TV,
was cutting edge
and
actually.
they managed to have season after season after season of epic humor and never offend a group of people. In fact, I feel like they uplifted people who were marginalized because the humor allowed for it to happen. So
Designing Women was the same way.
it is
They both
definitely
had like
possible to do,
episodes on AIDS, and Golden Girls had the Confederate flag episode.
right?
There was a main character in Designing Women that was had gotten out of prison.
Oh, what's the name? Murphy Brown. That was an edgy one too. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's
She
right.
she she was very witty and
liberal.
sarcastic. Yeah, and liberal, and I liked that about her. Like,
Yeah.
she wasn't
My
afraid to speak her mind.
Again, my family used to watch reruns of this show called Hogan's Heroes, which is,
Oh
the
yeah.
behind enemy lines, and there's
I
like,
just saw that
Colonel
recently. I liked it.
Clink, and it's so funny.
Yeah.
And again, they
Mash.
obviously they play, yes, MASH too. They play with all of the standard stereotypes. Yeah, I know. I love Schultz. Schultz is one of my favorite characters, honestly. Um this is why I think that it is possible we could still do something like that. But I also feel like comedy today is afraid. And I don't mean the comedians, right? I don't mean actors or actresses in general are afraid of it. I mean, I feel like on a corporate level,
I
we
think shows like Schitt's Creek and Superstore do it, and
Yeah.
they get
yes.
it right.
Yeah, and so okay, so let's branch off into this. So there is obviously a pretty big difference in what we get from paid streaming content and what we get from serialized network TV.
Well,
And
Schitt's Creek was Canadian and it came here. So
uh,
so it wasn't even on Netflix until it was almost over. They
right.
Yeah.
premiered it.
Yep.
But again, you're paying for the content. And so when you're paying for the content, I do feel like we are exposed to
More risks.
new and varied ideas in comedy. When you're not, we definitely get a much more homogenized version of comedy.
Well,
It's
Superstore was on
becoming
NBC, wasn't it?
more and more homogenized. Yes. I don't know if I would consider that like cutting edge. I mean, it was funny.
I think humor goes like
Well,
basic TV, like direct TV, then it goes like HBO and Showtime, and then it goes to streaming. Like it
well,
advances the edginess. Does that make sense?
It does.
well, I want to say like the reason why I consider it kind of edgy is they focused on a lot of issues like immigration and
True.
like workers' rights and like there's the liberal kid that everyone liked to make fun of as well. And
Mhm.
so I think um and they also had like a gay character um and they made fun of him, and so like nobody was off limits in that show. So I think the fact that they were able to make it and have it on regular TV is why I would call it cutting edge.
I think that there's a level at which we deem humor inaccessible in a way to general audiences. And if you make people pay for stuff, they are invested in it in a way that they're not if it is just being broadcast.
But
It's
you still
uh,
pay for cable, so
well, true, but it's still, there is still something around the idea of passive entertainment as opposed to
okay.
paying for your entertainment, which is like, oh well, I'm making this choice. Like if you buy an HBO subscription, yeah, you're paying for content that is delivered to you by HBO.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so I'm gonna switch gears here for just a second. The other day, I watched, actually in preparation for this show, I watched a whole bunch of stand-up comedy
Oh yeah.
specials, and some of them, oh my gosh, they just absolutely had me on the floor. And some of them, I don't even like the actual comedians, but I loved their humor. I mean, it really was funny. And then there is some humor that feels to me like, I think we talked about this before the podcast, that they are truly not getting why what they are telling as a joke isn't funny. Not because out of context it wouldn't be funny, but because it's not funny to tell a joke, as an example, to an anonymous audience. Because now I'm not talking about being in a nightclub where you have direct contact with people. I'm not even talking about being in a theater where you may have more in person kind of vibe. You can feel out the audience, right? I am talking about broadcast comedy specials. You run the risk of not just alienating, but villainizing
Mhm.
marginalized communities. And I do think that it is something that we
Dave
need to
Chappelle.
think about. Yeah, honestly, as funny as I think that Dave Chappelle can be, I'm also sometimes incredibly offended on his behalf. Like, how can you not see that what you are doing here feels so uncomfortable?
I think
And
that's the point though. I think that's where he's what he's
But
trying to do.
that's the
understood.
but that's the problem, like, whenever you do that and you get the trans community, um, when you put them in danger, your comedy's gone too far.
I think, Tori, I think that one of the things about, specifically, let's just talk about Dave Chappelle for a second. I think one of the things that he runs the risk of is creating a whole environment whereby people who already are very targeted get a bigger target painted on their back. And it's not
Mhm.
that the humor isn't funny. It's not that it isn't funny, as an example, if someone who was trans said almost exactly the same thing to people who also are trans in their same circle. It might be hilarious. The problem is that out of context, it feels like it just makes things worse. And
Mm.
Right.
and I have to agree that in some situations, that's a thing that we need to consider. Also, if I can just sort of broaden the topic slightly, we all make a social contract with each other in terms of how we behave in public, what we deem appropriate. We basically just, it's an unwritten contract. It's not like when you're born, you get a book of life that says, well, here's what you have to do, but we understand it because we interact with each other, and we know, as an example, not to call our moms, you know nasty dirty names, or tell them, hey mom, you actually belong in a brothel or something like that, because your mom would smack you silly and go,
Yeah.
that's
And
not
like
funny.
everyone knows you don't make Holocaust jokes, for instance.
No.
You just don't
See,
Or
do it.
AIDS jokes. Like there are certain things and like when people die and all that stuff, like it's like
Which is
too
why
soon,
the
you know?
trans community should be left off limits unless you're trans.
that's what I'm talking about by talking about the
Yeah.
social contract. And what I think happens is the social contract evolves over time. Or I
Mhm.
shouldn't say evolves, it develops. It develops new layers, new nuances, and then some things we let go. And we say, okay, this is totally all right. You can tell me a joke about the Twin Towers. I'm okay with it. It was a long time ago
Mm.
for some people. Nope, it'll always be too soon. But
Yeah.
that's what I'm talking about when I
But,
say, look, we have a social contract with each other. We know by gauging what we're about to say whether it's going to be appropriate or not, right? Does that make
well,
sense?
Sarah Silverman did a joke about, she's like, I know 9/11 was really bad for everyone, but it was especially bad for me. That's the day I found out this Starbucks drink had like 3,000 calories in it or something.
No. Like, I'm
That was
sorry.
on her Jesus is Magic tour.
I think honestly, like, there's certain things that you just don't joke about. Just like,
Right.
just no. Like, in comics will always be successful if they avoid those topics, like.
And and honestly, I feel like comics at this point are basically saying, and forgive me for not being sort of like as open-minded as I feel like I want to be with this, but I feel like comics are saying, well, you're impeding my ability to
First
do my
Amendment.
craft by telling me that I cannot tell this joke or that joke. Like, that absolutely runs counter to what comedy is supposed to be all about. Everything is supposed to be on the table with comedy.
Cheap
And
jokes are mean you're not good at your job, though. So that's their problem.
right, and I will point, I think, as a perfect example of how this works, to dun dun dun, The Onion,
Oh
and
yeah.
say that everything that The Onion puts out is this remarkably well judged piece of work that
So
even
smart.
in 3 sentences captures whatever the parody moment is at the time and does it with a kind of comedy grace, which all you need to sort of realize is, hey, yes, this is funny, but yes, there's a way to do it and a way not to do it. And that, I think, is where we're sort of like missing some of this. Okay, but let's launch into this real quick. So part of what happens when especially comedians get into trouble is they run to the hills and shout from the highest mountaintop that they are victims of cancel culture.
Cancel culture.
Uh,
I don't believe in
Okay.
cancel culture.
Now, well, I want to talk about this because I feel like this is sort of it is definitely this central tenet in comedy that it doesn't seem to be in a lot of other places. I know it is in other places, but it feels over exaggerated in comedy. And maybe that's just the nature of the beast here, but I think that it's
what
worth
exactly
mentioning.
is it? I'm a little lost.
Uh, okay, Betty, explain to us what you think cancel culture is all about.
So when somebody does something deemed inappropriate or offensive, supposedly the person is canceled, meaning people stop giving them money and ruin their career.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay, now cancel culture oftentimes sort of runs hand in hand with some kind of monetary gain, right? You are trying to shut my voice down, therefore I cannot use my voice to either, further my financial existence or get my message out. Like, politicians have been a huge fan of using cancel culture as a reason for other constituents not liking them or shutting down arguments because they think that they're wrong. I personally think that this has definitely gone way too far. But I do think that at the heart of it, there is something to be said for, hey, you want to participate in the social contract. You want people to come to your shows. You want Netflix to pay for your theater, your performance, in order to have it be rebroadcast. But if that's the case, then you also have to accept that while there is great monetary gains, there can also be monetary risk. That's how capitalism works.
You know what? I
We
want to complain for just a second about Andrew Lloyd Webber and Leah Michelle. Leah
okay.
Michelle does a comeback. They put her in Funny Girl. Um, TikTok and everywhere is filled with this making fun of her, calling her an evil person, a bad person, saying she doesn't deserve another chance because of
Right.
stuff she did in her 20s on Glee during a honestly a horrific time in her life, and when she was a child and before she had a child. Andrew Lloyd Webber, he,
Wait, Andrew Lloyd Webber, the composer?
yeah, the one who canceled Cinderella and just got like fired a bunch of people with no notice, kind of thing. Like he has bad behavior, and everyone is like, nobody's saying anything about it. They're like, welcome back to the theater in New York. Meanwhile, Lee Michelle needs to be canceled. It's like the sexism, and they're like, he's a grown man. When they keep saying Lee Michelle can't read, and it's a big joke, which I think is not funny in itself, making fun of people because they can't read.
Which is okay, that is a thing, and there is always, again, I do think that there is a point at which we all, as viewers of entertainment, we get to make certain choices, right? What has, I think, fueled a lot of discontent among audiences, and the inequity between exactly what you're just talking about, the kind of like, okay, well, this person gets this amount of spotlight and this person doesn't get any, or whatever. The problem that I feel like we have with this is that we're not tipping the scales properly. We're definitely not saying that each person's humor equals another person's humor, because it's not, right?
Right.
Our humor is different from, let's say, dad jokes. Dad jokes are still funny, but maybe they don't exist in a world all to themselves in the kind of humor that you want to experience. Okay, but
like, I don't get puns, but some people think puns are funny or punny or whatever.
Puns are my life, so don't get me started on
I love puns. Like,
yes.
they're the
All it is,
best.
I don't really get them.
But the English language, if I may digress slightly, the English language was crafted for puns. There is nothing about a pun that a wordsmith does not find absolutely enthralling. Even if it is the worst pun in the world, a good wordsmith will go, okay, you got me. Yeah. Okay. Once again, though, let's move back to this. So, the idea that we use cancel culture, and I'm putting this in quotes, cancel culture, to give comedians a hard time is, I think, exactly the opposite of what audiences are trying to say. What they're trying to say is, we want you to be successful as a comedian. However, we don't find this funny. And the more that you push back on it as a comedian and say, well, screw you if you don't find it funny, go someplace else, the more the audience goes, now I really don't like you. Because now, not only do I find your humor to be difficult or problematic or whatever, but I also find you to be problematic. And
Yeah.
that's what happened, I think, with Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
None of the spotlight would have been on Dave Chappelle, and he still would be a funny guy, and he would still be out there without any of the microscope of the world.
Yeah, he disappeared to Africa for a really long time. Like, he did his he did a sabbatical.
I think the spotlight became too much. He was stressed or something was happening.
Yeah, he like had a meltdown pretty much.
So, and I am not saying that we want any of that to happen to a person, because of course we do not, right? Nobody wants another person to feel that kind of passionate anguish. No, we don't want that for people. But we also need a vehicle by which to say, hey, that's not funny. Or this is so off brand for the social contract that we have to call you out on it and say, stop painting targets on this person's back, or this group who's already marginalized, or whatever. Let's fix it in a way that you can still be funny, but maybe that the humor isn't going to actually make someone die. And I know that sounds like hyperbole, but honestly, in today's day and age, it's not. We live in a world where everything is fueled by media, whether it's quick content on TikTok, or whether it's longer content in a series, or whether it's just a one-off special in comedy, it matters. It just
Well,
matters.
that and like you're only going to support people who share your values, and if they don't share your values, and you stop giving them your money and time, that's not cancel culture.
So and that right, and that's the other thing. The other thing which I feel like is less problematic but more problematic for people that don't understand is you can be very vocal about liking or disliking something without using your pocketbook or your voice in other ways to show that displeasure. If Dave Chappelle with his Netflix specials had offended more people would have left Netflix over it. More people would have
Yeah.
said, "No, I don't like this." But let's face it, content providers have a great deal of latitude over us because, well, maybe I don't like Dave Chappelle, but I really love Stranger Things.
Oh,
So
I've never seen
here's the
Stranger
deal with the
Things.
devil.
I just watched it and finished it.
So when
It's
you
pretty
have
good.
the deal with the devil on these content providers, you don't get to choose some of these things the way that you think you get to choose. And then what do? So you can't get rid of Netflix. So what do? You go to social media and
Mhm.
you say to everyone who will listen, this, 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 and this. And that's where I think we maybe kind of go over the line because that content is, yes, we can say I don't like the content, but we have to, I think, honestly, this is just my opinion, we have to stop using comedy as a way to cudgel other people
Mm,
when the comedian is not trying to. Yeah, it's okay to call it out. It's not okay to cudgel the comedian, right?
right.
It's not okay to call into question everything about a person simply because their comedy says this or this. It is okay to say this comedy isn't fair and I don't like it and I don't want this to be a part of my, viewing experience and all of that. I'm totally with that. And you can also say to Netflix, please don't paint targets on the backs of marginalized communities because this feels dangerous.
Well, I
That
don't
is
know
totally okay.
if they're painting targets on the backs of marginalized communities that say they're transphobic, racist, homophobic, then that does say they're bad people. If that's their humor, if their humor is racist, they're racist.
Yeah. And racism is some topic that you have to be very, very, very careful with
I
because
really made Jen mad. She just left. She was like, I don't want to hear this anymore.
I know. Oh my God. What do we do?
It was me. I'm sorry, Jen. I pissed you off, huh?
You kicked me
Just-
off the net.
I
I
pissed you off,
realized
Eileen.
that I realized, Betty, that you thought that was funny, but stop punching down. Okay.
Which part?
Well, I am sitting in the box directly under you, so I'm just saying stop punching down. Um,
Oh, is that why you logged off? Is that what made you mad? You're like, that
Stop
ginger.
beating me up.
yeah.
Ree, ree,
I
ree.
do think that there is something to calling people out to say, hey, you know what, this is racist, or I mean, like, as an example, um, and I know this isn't about comedy, but it's very topical for me. Um, I love Lovecraft stories, but I hate Lovecraft as the person writing the Lovecraftian story. It was terrible, and he really was a racist, and it was miserable, the stuff that he wrote. But I do love the ideas. Like, there's so much content underneath it that's like, ooh, man, okay, yes.
There are some comics though, like Jeff Foxworthy, that borderline. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like he's making fun of a group of people, but that's
Who's a group of
okay.
people?
And
The rednecks,
so let
like
so
But
let's
he's one of
so
the rednecks,
yeah.
let's
right?
talk about Andrew Dice Clay then. What do
Oh
you guys
yeah,
think about Andrew Dice Clay? Like, I mean, to me as a woman, I hate his crap. I hate
I don't
it
know who he
because
is.
it feels like he is just being misogynistic to be misogynistic. That's it. Like,
yeah.
if is that funny? I don't think it's funny.
Louis
Personally, I find
C.K. is kind of like that too.
I think well, first of all, I think I generally think women are funnier, but after we found out about what happened with Louis CK, he's even
Mm.
less funny
Yeah.
because
All right.
it's true, I guess.
Okay, I'm gonna pose a question to you guys. Tell me what you think about this, right? Uh, yeah, right. I know he just stole stuff. Um, and maybe that's the problem because just saying whatever you think on the top of your brain that you think is funny and you haven't actually crafted it as a joke or as something that is supposed to be humor, that's an issue. Comedians are supposed to be. Seinfeld is sort of, if you, I don't know if you guys have ever watched comedians in cars getting coffee.
I think I've
Yes.
seen an
It
episode, but I
is
don't really like Jerry Seinfeld.
I
So.
love Giant. I love Seinfeld. I love Larry David. Larry
Well,
okay.
I
David is probably
like
the
Seinfeld
funniest man in the world
because
to
of
me.
Elaine.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
Seinfeld. Okay, but just let's just talk about Jerry Seinfeld. He just rides around in cars, grabs
Mhm.
various comedians, young and old, and invites them out to coffee, and they have meaningful conversations, and sometimes not so meaningful. And you just get to see raw, sort of, yeah, this is funny. You guys are just funny by yourself because some people really just are humorous. They can find humor in things, but it's a
That-
craft.
That's
It,
why I
it
love
it's
Larry David.
work.
That's
It
why
it
that's why I love Larry David because he makes fun of like he makes fun of people. He puts himself in very awkward situations, but he
Well, yeah,
doesn't offend anybody because
well,
it's
because
something
he
like
writes himself as a terrible human, and
yes.
I like writers who do that, like Mindy Kaling and what's his name in The Office. They purposely wrote their characters to be idiots. Abfab, she purposely writes the characters to be bad people. Um,
So self-deprecating humor is always funny because self-deprecating is the kind of thing that makes us all realize that we all have the same flaws. We all have the same potential to have things go wrong. We all can make fun of our own plight as it kind of unwinds. I
well,
agree. I feel
well,
like that is funny.
well, one of the big themes in Abfab was Eddie being, they call her like all kinds of fat jokes, and like even her daughter. And so I wonder if now that would actually be acceptable, even
I
self-deprecatingly.
I don't know. I've seen a lot of Melissa McCarthy stuff that I
Mhm.
find just absolutely like
I love
borderline
Melissa McCarthy.
ridiculous. Like, okay, we get it. I'm not even going to say you're fat. I'm just going to say, okay, we get it. You think you're fat. I mean, okay, but how many times can you tell the same joke and just repackage it and expect us to laugh? Because at some point it starts feeling like it's sad.
That's
Like,
her niche though, you know what
eek.
I mean? Like that's her
Well,
that's
I
what
don't know,
made her
like
famous, so she's hanging on to it.
no, that's not what made her famous. She was
She's
Suki, and that's what made
funny.
her famous.
She
Yeah,
is funny.
Melissa
um,
McCarthy is funny, and if you
she's so funny.
unleash her,
Yeah,
Mike and
she's
Molly
also a
was great.
Melissa McCarthy is also a brilliant actress. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
she
And
truly
Michael
is
Molly was
able
smart
to
as
emote
Yeah.
well.
really well. Like
Yeah.
there's a gift behind that. Okay, so totally OT here. Well, not OT, but totally switching tracks here. And I
ST.
realize that there may be a little bit of self-deprecation in this, so beware. If you had to categorize your life, or if you had to summarize your life in a single sitcom, what would best describe your life? Who wants to take that first?
Well, I wouldn't say it summarizes my life, but like
Or best scribes? Best the humor best fits. Like, yep, this is the humor of my life.
I would like to think that I am like Chuck, and it has all of the humor that he's a nerd and sort of inept at times, but
Hmm.
lovable and funny. And there's a strong female lead. There's nostalgia. Um, I don't know.
Mhm.
I think I'm Chuck, and so
Okay.
with
That's
a
a
little
good
more
one.
tragedy in my life.
What and would you say that the humor in that, like, that you can identify with it real, like, readily? Like, would
Yes.
other people? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Like
What about you, Tori?
I would say my life is like The Office.
Hmm.
So
deadpan.
deadpan, very very dry sense of humor. I'm sarcastic. I'm like Jim. Okay, that and the pranks. Oh my god! Like I have done all of that, all of that. So it's situational humor. I'm funny in situations. I'm not like I can't go out on a stage and do stand up, but I can make jokes about what's going on and it's
I could do some
funny.
improv, but I could not go on stage and do some comedy.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So I want to say that my life is like The Office.
Yeah. Chuck's like that too. He's situationally funny. And
Yeah.
he won over the hot girl by being charming and funny.
Community, yes, that was a great show. And so was
Community was a great show.
Parks and Recreation was pretty good too.
Yep. Parks and Recs, that's one of my favorites. I'm definitely a Leslie Knope fan.
Yeah, she's
That was really
great.
funny. I I have to say that sometimes when you ask people this question, the answer that they come back with is really surprising. When I asked a couple of my friends from my writers group this very question, their answers were a little scary. One of my friends who is this like super meek and very mild kind of personality person said Rick and Morty.
I love Rick and Morty. That is my
I was like,
favorite
whoa,
show. No, that is
what
my
are you
favorite
doing?
show ever. Like I'm such a Rick and Morty fan that I'm about to get a
Please
tattoo.
tell me why stoners are so obsessed with Rick and Morty.
Because it's funny. It's funny. Like and it is smart. Like Rick is really smart and it's smart comedy. Like
But like, why stoners? Like you go
I don't know.
into a
I
smoke
don't
shop
know.
and literally it's everywhere.
It is everywhere. I don't know.
Everywhere.
Okay, so sometimes humor I feel like is funny because we make it funny, right? Like it's edgy because we make it edgy, not because it really is edgy, but let's face it,
Superstore.
Rick and Morty. Yeah, you're gonna get
I
hate
made it.
mail.
I made it edgy.
um People generally tend, I think, to like Rick and Morty because unless you're the Rick and Morty fanboys, in which case just yeah, no, I'm not even gonna I can't deal with that. But the reason that people like really, the Rick and Morty experience is because yeah, it's funny, but it's also gut-wrenchingly serious in
Yeah.
this emotional drawn out level, and I think honestly I think stoners love it because it allows you to sort of like experience a lot of stuff in a very short packed period of time, and you don't have to invest so much of yourself in it to really enjoy it.
That makes sense.
It's
Yeah.
just sort of all out there on the table.
And Rick has a heart. Like he acts like he doesn't care and he's a little stoic, you know what I mean? Like he doesn't have emotions, but then with the clone situation, you see a different side of him. You see that he actually cares and he's
Yeah.
a little regretful how much he screwed up his life,
Like
because he
Sheldon
did.
Cooper.
Yeah.
He has
Yeah.
no emotion usually.
Yeah, and he makes fun of people and he's mean
He doesn't
and
understand it.
yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, see, Dan Hammond does nail the emotional trauma. You're absolutely right, Josh. But it's funny, right? It's funny. Not the emotional trauma is not funny, but everything around it is funny. And anyone who really experiences good humor understands that you're trying to connect with an audience to say, "Hey, you know what's funny? This thing that you all have done or experienced." I was watching a stand-up
Therapy.
comedian the other day who was like, you know what's really funny, everybody? Why do we all hate our mom? And he goes, and of course we don't all hate our mom, right? I mean, I hear the
Yeah.
audience going, we don't hate our mom. And he's like, but I'll tell you what, if your mom calls you right now, what's the first thing you're going to do? You're going to pick up your phone, you're going to see who it's from, and you're going to go, oh, fuck. It's mom. What's going on?
Mom
And he's like,
always My mom always used to call at the most awkward times. Like
well,
I
it
wanted
is
to talk
right,
to her, but
though.
I couldn't.
That
Well,
was
Tig
funny.
Notaro.
That was funny because it absolutely is something that everybody does, right? Everybody looks at
Yeah.
their phone when somebody calls that's close to them and goes, ugh, okay, what's going on now? And the reason that it's funny is because he calls it out in the beginning and says, why do we all hate our mom? Okay,
Well,
I
Pig and
I'm gonna give you.
takes tragedy and makes it funny, like having cancer, her mom, like
Yeah.
getting dysentery, whatever the disease is. I can't remember. The one that's basically like,
Okay, well,
yeah.
Josh, it's spooky season.
Um,
Let's not move into ghost calls from beyond.
but then her mom died when she like was in the hospital from slipping on stairs, and then she made that all a comedy routine.
Right, right. And I mean, things that happen to us that are tragic can still be funny. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I had to really think about the question that I asked you guys for myself, and I went through a number of them before I settled on The Good Place. It
Oh, that's a
is
good one.
equal parts philosophy, just raw human behavior, a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, sort of
That's a
a
good one.
there's an epic amount of humor attached to things that are the everyday stuff, but it makes you feel like you are connected to something much bigger. And
Also
that's what I
created
feel
by
like
trauma.
that's what I feel like humor does. Humor connects us all together to things that, look, we all experience this, so how do we get through it? I feel like it does a really good job with that. Um, I want to ask about the future of comedy in terms of what you guys think might be happening. Um, I would say it's weekly. Well, it's weekly, and then there's days when we binge more and more and more. Bob's Burgers has been
Oh, I
a
love. Oh my
staple.
god, that's my favorite. Rick and Morty than Bob's Burgers. Seriously, all during the day, if I don't like, if I have time and I don't know what to watch, I put on Bob's
Right?
Burgers.
Family
So,
Guy's
and
the only show that like that I'll watch that's a cartoon.
and it's funny because I think Family Guy had a place in our family for a while until myself, because I never liked it, but until my kids moved on from it and were like, you know what, this isn't funny. It's not funny because it's just the same old humor over and over again. There's nothing new
Yeah.
here. It's all the same exact shtick.
Yeah.
Um,
And I get a
I,
little tired of them making fun of Meg.
But I love the reason that I think a lot of people love Bob's Burgers, as sort of a companion, if you will, on animation,
Mm-hmm.
is because Bob's Burgers deals with, once again, family dynamics, dynamics
Mm-hmm.
between friends, things that you sort of have to confront that can seem huge, and then you solve them. And it
Mm-hmm.
feels like humor is sort of like that vehicle.
And I
Um,
love the family vibe because,
yeah,
like,
right.
like Linda's such a great mom. She's so dumb, but she's such a great mom. Like she's no, she's ditzy. I would say she's
She's
very
ditzy.
ditzy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's probably a good way to say it.
Yeah. And so, like, and Bob is very serious,
And
and
she's
like,
also Linda is also Linda's my sometimes spirit animal, if you will.
she's so
Mine
funny
is
Because
though. Yeah.
Leslie. Nope.
she channels this enthusiasm that I can only hope to attain one day. Her love of Christmas is only rivaled by my own. She has this like easy way of saying, "Hey, everything is going to be okay," while literally the world is burning down,
Yes,
and I
she is
freaking
so,
love it.
she's
That's
so
similar reasons why
positive.
that's similar reasons why Leslie Nope is mine, because she's so like positive.
Yeah,
Like she has
yeah.
that quote where she's like, when people are just yelling, when people are they're just yelling that they care or something like that. I can't remember the quote. Josh, you can
So
look it up.
you
so
know, and she was hanging bats one day and she was like, "Oh, and they're smiling because it's their favorite holiday." And I was like, "That's so funny."
the,
Like
one of the
smiling
things
bats.
one of the things that I loved about The Good Place too, which is sort of mirrored in a bunch of well, it's mirrored in a lot of different comedy, but not always done as effectively. I'm not a huge fan of slapstick comedy. But
Mm.
I know people that are. I know people that love it, right?
I don't really
Um
like Family Guy. Like I don't. It's
See,
okay.
Family Guy is a little bit more slapstick.
Yeah.
There's a like a different level of sort of being intentionally in each other's faces and using violence, if you will. And it's just it is definitely a different characteristic that, but Rick and Morty is too. Rick and Morty
Yeah.
has a lot of violence in it, and you
Mhm.
have to kind of gauge, okay, where are you with all of this? If you go hop over to Bob's Burgers, even though
Yeah.
people are in peril, there isn't a lot of like actual violence in it. And that is not to be judgmental about any of these shows. It is just to say, hey, you know what? We all have different comfort zones with this, and sometimes we like this and sometimes we like this.
Yeah, Seth MacFarlane, I'll tell you a little story. Seth MacFarlane wanted to get in Star Trek so bad. He wanted to be an extra, and he asked for years to be on one, and they kept denying him. So he was like, fuck you, I'm going to make my own show. And he made Orville, and it's super funny. Like, it's a parody of Star Trek, but he does it really
Right.
well, you know?
Yeah, the Orville is actually really funny. I
Yeah,
really
it's
I
really
liked
want
it
to
a
see it
lot.
actually.
If although it's animated and probably not everybody's cup of tea,
Orville
if you
is
get it,
animated.
no, I'm gonna
oh.
talk
Okay.
about what I was just gonna talk about. The series that's on HBO Max called Harley Quinn is also kind of amazing. But it's that dark humor that is, it finds a spot with some people that is just like an itch that you didn't even know needed to be scratched, and it is just perfect. She's so cynical, and the characters that are around Harley Quinn are similarly affected by her cynicism, but in the end there is such a satirical note to everything that it's really hard to not feel like this is true humor,
Yeah,
entertaining humor. It's not straightforward humor, that's for sure.
I didn't
um
see that one,
I
so
like, you know who I like? I like Claire from Modern Family.
yeah.
mm,
She's a
Modern
good and sh
Family Modern
she's a good
Family is a
play off
great show.
of
Yeah.
Phil, like his goofiness and her seriousness. Um, I feel like there's a circus around her, and usually she's the straight man,
Yeah. hmm
and she's funny. Her
Modern
bitchiness,
Family like push envelopes too, like having a
yeah.
gay family and all
Adopted an
of
Asian baby.
yes. So, it was a pioneer. It was a pioneer because they did nobody did that before. And it's
definitely.
funny, so
I
now it
like,
opened the gates to other things.
I like the dad, Ed O'Neill's character,
Yeah.
because you can see that at the beginning he's not very accepting of his son's gay lifestyle, and they talk about it a lot. But then he grows as a person, and I
Mhm.
feel like people watching shows like this can see themselves in him, and then maybe if he's while he's growing as a character, that gives them the opportunity to do the same thing while they don't even realize it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, so I want to bring up one last one before we close out. I want to bring up Fargo.
Oh,
Have any
yeah.
of you seen Fargo?
I saw the
Yes.
movie, and it was hysterical and also traumatizing.
Right. And the series follows an extremely succinct, exacting line as the movie does. It is one of the blackest comedies that I can think of that really hits every single note. It is just sort of a little mini perfection. I really loved Fargo for reasons that I don't watch any other kind of humor, right? I I last night, I think, I mentioned that I watched Chucky. Chucky is also hilarious. I mean, not hilarious like, oh, every time something happens, it's a joke, but hilarious like there is such a sense of surrealism going on
Mhm.
here that it's hard not to feel like this is comical. It's absolutely comical. So, as much as it's horrible, I felt the same way, obviously, about Ash versus Evil Dead. Ash
Oh,
versus Evil Dead
yeah.
was like, it was hilarious. It
It
was so funny.
was.
but it was
Bruce
so
is so funny.
serious. Like it was,
Yeah.
look, there are deadites, there's bad things happening. And the world is blowing up around them, and they're still finding ways to make things funny.
Yeah.
I want to give a shout out to Abbott Elementary. It's so
Yes,
cleverly written, and I am sort of kind of obsessed with it. Not like that and AbFab are my two obsessions right now, I think. Um,
Abbott Elementary won quite a few accolades during the Emmy Awards and
so
has a
good.
renewed sense of viewership right now because of that. So you're in good company.
Yeah.
Lower Decks, the Star Trek Lower Decks is really funny too. It's a cartoon,
That is
but
funny.
like
I've seen it. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like it's another parody of Star Trek, it's
We
part of the family, but
Stoners
we
love
we wa-
their cartoons, eh?
yes.
we watched Lower Decks after Picard had finished, and then we watched season 2.
Oh yeah.
And it really is, it perfectly encapsulates what would make Star Trek funny if Star Trek was a comedy. So
Yes.
I completely agree. Yes, it's
Yeah.
actually pretty funny. Okay, so we're gonna have to close out because we are running over a little bit time here, but I do want to first of all say thank you to both my guests, Betty and
You're
Tori.
welcome.
Thank you so much for being here tonight and discussing this super important but difficult concept to get through. And I wanted to get your opinion on something. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, because it is October and because we only have a limited number of weeks before Halloween, I wanted to get a jump start on some Halloween viewing.
Ah.
So I was thinking that next week we could jump ahead in our schedule and talk about horror.
Yes.
Horror on TV, horror as a platform. One of my big things that I would love for everyone to think about before next week is, why is it that we love horror so much and then we're so disappointed by
Oh
it?
God,
Well, I
yes.
mean, I don't know if you have seen, but Rotten Tomatoes is awash in super bad ratings for horror movies. I mean, like it's almost a living trope all by itself.
Well, you have
So,
certain shows and certain movies that are so good that scare you, and so you compare them to everything else.
well,
Well, for
and
a little
like
while, that was all
comedy,
I was watching. Like that was the thing I really liked, the television horror, even though I don't really like horror because it was the most cleverly written stuff on TV.
Yes.
and I think like comedy, horror is an extremely subjective experience. So
Mhm.
what one person finds terrifying, spiders, another person is just like, "Oh, that's fine, just put it outside," and I'm, burning down the house because there's literally a spider. I can't watch spider movies. I can't.
Well,
I can't do it.
I think they're both exaggerations on life.
Yes, I think you're right. And I think oftentimes, and I'll get into this next week, horror has a perfect vehicle for metaphor, especially for the mental condition that we find ourselves in more often than not, human trauma, all kinds of things. But we'll talk about that next week. I wanted to plant that seed and see if you guys were on board. Sounds like maybe this is a good thing.
Yeah.
So probably we won't be talking about the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown next week, but we will definitely talk about Hellraiser that is premiering tomorrow. So we'll take
You
a
did say
look.
horror is also subjective, so maybe some people think Charlie Brown is a horror.
If you think
Yes.
that Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin is horrifying, definitely let us know,
I
and we'll.
watch that show every year. I made my kids watch it. Like I was
I
like,
do
"You
too.
guys are gonna watch this and you'll like it."
I still watch it every single year. Josh and
Yeah.
I talked about this on 10 to 1 yesterday. It made my list as this is a Halloween movie that we have to watch.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we'll talk next week about the horror series on television and see what we can come up with to maybe give people ideas about what could be scary. I thank you all. Betty, tell us how to get to you on social media.
You can find me on TikTok or Instagram at Betty Chitty Bang Bang.
And Tori, how can we find you on social media?
I have my own show called The Infectious Geek, and normally it's on Friday nights at 9. I'm premiering tomorrow my second half of the season. So
Ooh.
tune in. We're gonna talk about uh rules to surviving disaster movies, because
Oh, nice.
yeah, we all have, a certain formula, if you will, in disaster movies, and I want to talk about that. And that's at 9 p.m. And you can catch me on Facebook. You can catch me on Instagram at Tori Rush, or Rush Story. I'm sorry. And you can also get me on TikTok at Tori Rush too. So you can just go to my profile and find some funny memes, and tune into my podcast on tomorrow. Mm,
Awesome.
yeah.
You can find me at moviesandmeals.com. Lots and lots of Halloween recipes. As soon as I get a free moment, I have about 15 to upload. So lots of good things coming. And with that, I will say good night. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you found this at least a little bit entertaining, if it wasn't super funny. And I have to say, I managed to make it through the entire podcast without telling a single joke. I
Yay. No, I'm just kidding.
it's that's the funniest part of the whole podcast. All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night.